Well, hello and welcome back to the Two Pennies channel. My name is Jim Reed, and the last few weeks I've had the opportunity to talk about a few of the projects that we have done in the past and what we're currently working on, which is really exciting with the cassava mill. If you haven't had an opportunity to see that, you can go ahead and click on a link below and it'll take you to that video of what we're doing. One of the things I wanted to talk about this week, though, that I think is really important is how we've grown over the last 9 years. The example of our first project, which was starting a poultry farm at an orphanage, is kind of our jump-off point for that. In 2011, when Moses, Kofi, and I went to Ghana, his home country, one of the things that we were able to do was we went on a journey to an orphanage about an hour north of the capital city of Accra. The orphanage was home to about 150 kids, 100 of them which lived there full-time and another 50 that came on for schooling. One of the things that we did notice was that there were these poultry houses that were along kind of the bottom side of a hill there that were empty. There were about 6 of them that they were all stacked together, and they hadn't had any chickens there for a while. So we asked them, is that something that they would be interested in? And their owners both expressed to us that yes, this is something that they hope to get back into someday. And so it became our project that year to raise $10,000 so that we could buy 2,000 chickens for this orphanage, and they would be able to have enough eggs to feed to their children. And also they would be able to sell excess eggs to the community around them so that they would be able to buy those additional things that they needed on a monthly basis. So it's exactly what we did. The people from First Baptist Church banded together, had this amazing fundraiser, and we raised $10,000, the amount that we needed to get this poultry farm started. In January of 2012, we sent our first installment of money through our Ghanaian representative, Abuaji, and he was able to purchase the first shipment of 1,000 chickens, and we were so excited. He would send us pictures back of all these chicks just populating these houses, and it was really an exciting time for us. So we were thrilled with that. Then after that, I planned a visit back in spring of 2012. About 2 weeks before we went, we were notified that the chickens had been afflicted with this disease called gumboro, and they were dying. And by the time we got there in mid to late March of 2012, there were 187 birds left of the original 1,000. And it was devastating for them, and it was really humbling for us. We sat down with the owners and we discussed what had happened and how they wanted to proceed, and we had raised this money. We had spent half the money on the first half the chickens, and now we had to kind of take a step back and decide, is this something that we want to continue with? We sent money for another 500 to 1,000 chickens, and this time we had a veterinarian assigned to them, and these chickens began to produce eggs. I still remember how excited we were about that initial bucket of eggs, and pretty soon that bucket of eggs turned into cartons of eggs, turned into stacks of eggs, and we were just thrilled beyond belief. Over the course of the year, the chickens continued ramping up how many eggs they were producing, so that after a while, that flock of chickens that we had provided for them was producing over 7,000 eggs a month. Then the next time that we were planning on visiting, which was sometime in 2014, we received word that the chickens had been stolen. Someone had come in and emptied out the coops of those chickens, those 6 chicken houses where we had our next flock of chickens. They were completely cleared out, and there wasn't a single chicken left. So I wanted to share 3 lessons with you today that we learned from this experience. The first thing that we learned was that if you want to be part of a long-term solution, you need to have a long-term plan. We had talked with the people at Countryside and they had expressed the desire for a poultry farm, but we never found out what had happened to their chickens in the first place. There were these 6 long, empty poultry houses that were unfilled and had been for years. We never took the time to find out exactly why they were unfilled, and if we had, we would have discovered that it was due to poor management. As we stepped up and started investigating what happened with all of this and how could we have done a better job, that was one of the things that we discovered was they had never set aside money for extra feed or for caring for the poultry. And so this wasn't the first opportunity that they had had with poultry, and it wasn't the first time that it had failed. And so if you want to have that long-term impact, you need to have a long-term plan and have that discussion ahead of time. Which leads me to number 2. You need to have clear communication. We worked with a Bwaji who is a fantastic worker and a great communicator. The problem was that our Bwaji lived about 5 hours away from this orphanage. So every time we wanted to get word to them or find out how the chickens were doing or what else needed to happen, he had to drive 5 hours or get a ride or take transportation up there 5 hours to get that taken care of. The amount of work that he put in was unbelievable, but it also left us several weeks behind on all fronts and all our questions didn't get answered. So understanding how that communication is going to happen and being clear about how often it needs to happen is something that we really learned and have made great strides in on the years since then. Number 3, the idea of success needs to be defined. We could have considered this project a success from the very moment that we raised $10,000 in 4 weeks. We could have considered it a success when we bought our first 1,000 chickens, or when we bought the next batch of chickens and sent them over. We could have considered this project a success the minute we got our first eggs, or the time where we passed 1,000 eggs a month, or 3,000 eggs a month, or eventually 7,000 eggs a month. Any of those times we could have said this has been a successful project. But when the chickens were stolen, we were so devastated we considered that a failure. When we talked with the people at the orphanage about, the failure of the chickens and why it didn't work, they had a completely different take on it. They were so encouraged that people would come from the outside and take an interest in what they were doing and want to partner with them. That encouragement played a role in years to come as they continued caring for children and having hope for the future. So I encourage you, through our lessons that we've learned in really hard ways, you need to have a long-term plan if you hope to have a long-term solution. Number 2, have clear channels of communication before you begin a project and while you're undergoing that project. And number 3, define what success will look like before you undertake a project. Have that clear with the people you're trying to work with and for yourself. I really hope this lesson has been instructive for you. For some of you, it's to look back at the things that we've done in the past. We can do amazing things in the world, and I'm excited to share these lessons with you. Next week, we hope to take a look at our journeys and what has gone on with those journeys, and maybe speak with a guest on next week's edition of this video. But I just wish you Godspeed and go make a difference in the world.